My next guest is Brenda Yoho. She is the author of Lead with Two Rules, Feeling Good and Feeling Safe. Her career in public education has spanned more than 25 years as a teacher, elementary principal, middle school principal, and director. She provides encouragement and leadership advice to other educators. She also has worked with the Illinois Principals Association to support K-12 principals and staff members in rural and urban settings and helps them develop their skills and competencies in areas such as school improvement, curriculum, staff development, crisis planning, school culture, family improvement, grants, bullying, and goal setting. She provides mentoring and coaching to aspiring new and seasoned administrators, building trusting relationships and facilitating professional growth. Welcome to the podcast, Brenda.
Thank you, Dana. Thanks for having me.
Well, we'll start off with the question I ask everyone. Tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
Yeah, so I've been in the trenches a lot and had my lots of stories I could share with you, but I'm going to tell you the most recent one and how I got out of the trenches. So I think I want to share with your audience is that you always want to have a plan
Mhm.
that for the unexpected. So always know that you have a backup plan. You know how we always tell kids that you when you're younger, you want to say, yeah, I want to make it to the professionals. I want to be a big professional baseball player. But okay, but what's your backup plan? What's
Sure.
something else that you could do? So in 2010, I had a near death accident and I wasn't expecting that to happen. I had a first year administrator who was my assistant principal, but I have always had that belief that you always work with other people to make sure that they can do your job. So you share everything with them. And she was right smack in the midst of it because I was lifelined and I was out of work.
Mhm.
I was um, I had a traumatic brain injury. I'll just keep it short, Dana. And I wasn't expected to really make it from, I wasn't expected to live, but I did. And I fought back. And I wanted to be and continue on being a principal because that was my favorite job in the whole wide world. But I knew that I wasn't the same principal that I was before. I knew every student's name. I knew I could respond, and I just wasn't at the same level. And so I wanted to get out of that position. And so I went to my superintendent and I told him I was going to leave education. And he said, no, you can't leave education. And so he's like, you're doing fine. And I said, I may be doing fine, but I'm not at the level I think I should be. And so we found a spot for me as a director, but I continue to have some issues with more responsibilities. And so I ended up leaving education, but I wasn't done yet, Jane. I wasn't done. And so that's how I wrote the book. And that's how I ended up continuing to coach and mentor principals because I wasn't done. I didn't want to be out of the trenches, but I knew I couldn't be in the trenches because I couldn't take on all of that responsibility every single day.
Yeah.
So that's how I retired. And that's what brought me to writing the book and doing as much as I possibly can and helping others to know what I know that works in education.
Mm-hmm, hmm. So that was in 2018, and then starting to work with the Illinois Principals Association. Were you a principal in a urban or a rural district?
I both. I was assistant principal in the town in which I grew up, and
Okay.
then I moved up to an urban district. I was a principal there at a elementary school for 1 year, and then I went to a middle school. I was
Okay.
there for about 5 years,
Okay.
and yeah, my accident happened. Then I went to the directorship.
hmm hmm. So when you're working with both of these types of districts, you're really focusing a lot on how you can tie in home and community to help schools improve, right? So you told me in the pre-chat your work is finding solutions. So how would you approach coaching maybe for a new principal in a rural school that it might be such a small school that they don't have an AP and this person might not have much AP experience going into the principalship.
Yeah, the first thing you want to do is to learn the community. You
Mhm.
want to invite people in to have chats with you. One of the very first things that I did going into a large unit district
Mhm.
is I invited people in. I wanted to get to know who the people were that I was serving. That's a very important thing for new leaders to do, but also experienced leaders. Your community is changing often. So
Mhm.
continue to have that conversation with the people that you are serving and get to know who your community members are and the people that you're serving is so important. You need to have partners in education. And when I say partners in education, people get confused sometimes with thinking that that needs to be something that's monetary. It doesn't
Mhm.
have to be monetary. We'd love to have extra funding sources as rural communities because we don't have a lot of funding sources. And
Mhm.
as you get large unit districts, you have more opportunities to have a lot of funding sources. And there's a lot of those opportunities for you. But have those communications with, I say, homeschool and community. The three of you need to be working together as a team and doing the best that you can to offer as much as you can together for
Mhm.
the students in your district, in your school.
Mhm. Mhm. And I think something that you focus on a lot in your book is really looking at the solutions that are in within our control. Why do educators seem to, spend a lot of time, getting burnt out with those things that aren't within their control, especially if we're talking about community restraints slash district restraints, at the school level, since you are coaching those at the school level.
Yeah, it's very easy to get hung up on that. There are some things that you can't control, some things you can control. So you do the very best you can with using the tools and resources that you have that you can control. One of the things that I think that's so important that we need to identify is what are the resources that you have available to you within
Mhm.
your community that you know that you can make a connection with that can be a resource for you to use as a tool. So if you're the only person, if you're the building principal, you have no social worker, you have no school psychologist, you have nothing. You don't have a school resource officer. You need to be able to build up that tool belt that you have of
Mhm.
those resources you have within the community that you can call up and say, hey, I need some help. Any way you can come in and do a little workshop with these kids. Any way you can come in and do a workshop for our parents. Any way you can come in and do a workshop for our staff. And give them as much information as you possibly can about the issues that you're facing. You don't have to identify children necessarily, but identify the problem in which you want to find a solution for. And that's so important is that we focus so much on a problem, thinking that we have to, do X, Y, and Z, but we need to look at finding the solution. And that's with finding all of those resources that are available to us because we don't necessarily have to come up with a solution. We just have to find the resources that could maybe possibly find a solution for us.
Yeah, that's really important. You also talked about the being prepared, right? Because when you had your accident, you were prepared. The AP, although a new AP, was able to step into your position. Right? We tend to respond after the fact.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about how, maybe some of your previous experience prior to the accidents with, the death of a staff member or student, how those things prepared you to have your AP be prepared.
Yeah, you're right, Dana. It is, and I have some of that in my book too. It did prepare me for that
Mhm.
because you're not taught that when you're going through your college courses on things that happen to you. You never expect to have a staff member call you and say, "Hey, Mrs. Yoho, I'm going to have a sub because I just woke up and my wife is laying next to me and she's not breathing. I think she's dead."
Mhm.
That truly happened to me first year as an assistant principal. And I froze at first and didn't understand what I was hearing. And I couldn't believe that this man was calling me as his first response.
Yeah.
So I always make sure that everybody who is surrounding me absolutely knows everything about the things that we're doing. So I'll back it up with this, Dana. Teachers have emergency plans, and we have those in the office. They
Yes.
have them in the classroom, but we also have them in the office because our head secretary is the person who checks in the subs.
Mhm.
So the sub knows that they don't have anything, that they can come back to the office and we have a resource for them. Because let's just face it, teachers sometimes they don't plan on being absent, but that's why we have those emergency plans,
Mhm.
because we can go on that resource and we can have something for the kids already in place that follow along with what we're doing. So that's one of the things I always tell people to prepare. Make sure you have your staff prepared. Second thing is go ahead and write
Mhm.
those letters that you're not intending on using, but just in case. Because if somebody calls you and tells you that someone has passed away, it your emotions automatically kick in. And so if you can take out from your file a letter and it just has blanks with names you need to fill in,
Mhm.
it's the best way to be able to get the information out to everybody who needs to have that information and knows. We have crisis plans and they're well written, and we have those things for us within our administrative team that have those letters that are there just in case it happened to be me that
Mhm.
they would have to send a letter about.
Mhm.
And we don't want to ever think about those things, but it can happen. And it almost did to me.
Mhm.
So it's a good warning for everyone. If you have a student who passes away, what do you do? What's the first things that you do? Here are the steps. Have those already in place and be ready, because the media is going to come in and they're going to be knocking on your door wanting something.
Mhm.
One of the things that happened to us is that I had the urban district that I was in was a very low economic poverty school
Mhm.
and a district. And our mother that lost her son didn't have a picture of her son. So it was
Right.
up to us to find one.
Yeah.
So those are things that you have to think about. And, if you can do everything that you can think about before there's a problem, is
Yeah.
always better to be prepared.
Mhm. Yeah. Also in your book, you talk about, safety and well-being for students and staff and strategies to teach self-regulation, et cetera. Talk a little bit about some of these two rules that your book focuses on, and how that's helped you throughout your journey of education.
Sure, Dana. So the book is titled Lead with Two Rules, Feeling Good and Feeling Safe. That's exactly what the two rules are, feeling good and feeling safe. And I introduced that to students in a very simplistic way. And the rules are very simplistic as you state them. And
Mhm.
it's not one more thing that anybody has to do. There's not a curriculum that you have to follow. It's a simplicity in stating that everybody who walks through the doors is going to feel good about being here and they're going to feel safe. Now,
Mhm.
here is how you can help us to make that happen. And we
Mhm.
remind the students about thinking about not only themselves, but about others. And we focus a great deal on the fact that we have this great power called
Mhm.
choice.
Yeah.
And choice is huge. And so we talk to the kids that, and we explain to them that you choose everything that you do. So before you say or do anything, I want you to think about this and ask these questions. Is this going to make me feel good and feel safe?
Mhm.
Is this going to make others feel good or feel safe?
Mhm.
If your answer to any of those questions is no, you've identified a problem in need of a solution. Now you can choose to be part of the problem or part of the solution. The choice is absolutely always yours. But you have to remember, when you make that choice, there comes responsibility, accountability, and consequences.
Mhm.
So I can choose to go out and break one of the rules that we have if I get in my car and I decide to break the speed limit. Now I
Mhm.
made that choice. Now a policeman could pull me over and give me a ticket.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's the least that could happen. Or I could cause a wreck. I
Mhm.
could hurt someone. I could total my car. I could total someone else's car. I could kill someone because of a choice that I made.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
have to think about our choices, and we have to remember it's us, it's you that makes that choice, not anyone else, not your friend,
Mhm.
not your mom, not your dad, not your aunt, not your uncle, not me, not your teacher. It's you that made that choice.
Mhm.
And if you look, Dana, at all of the rules that we have, if you think about them, they all have something to do with feeling good and
Mhm.
belonging, feeling valued, and about safety. And if you go back in time and you think about when you were a kid,
Mhm.
the very first rule that maybe your mom taught you or your dad taught you, you think about what that rule was. I bet it had something to do with feeling good or feeling safe.
Mhm.
My first rule was about looking both ways before you cross the street.
Yeah.
I can remember my mom always saying that to me. And, and don't talk to strangers. That was another one. We had when I was growing up, we had that rule about when the street light came on, you had to go home. Yeah,
Mhm.
and if we didn't get home, boy, we were in big trouble, and because, back then everybody knew everybody. So when I'm talking about homeschool and community, I really would like to get back to making sure that everybody's looking out for everybody, that
Mhm.
everybody knows and has the same expectations and is teaching the same things, and that kids know where to go in the community when they're not feeling good and they're not feeling safe.
Mhm.
And that's so important. And I have in the book about resiliency
Mhm.
and building those things. And when kids are able to identify and think through that process when they're doing something. So, usually if they break a rule at school, they're sent to the office, maybe if there's a fight or something. We talk through it and they're able to process. And I eventually, it takes some time, but they're able to self regulate. They know the next time, okay, I got to think about this.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because our school, when I started at the middle school, which the book is focused on the two middle schools that I served, one was a rural school district, one was the large unit district. I kind of blended them together.
Mhm.
Um, the school that in the large unit district was like it was known to be one the worst school in the district at the time. There was fights all the time. There was no kids weren't coming to school. Kids were there was three different gangs. There was all kinds of problems. But within the first year of implementing this, and I just started it, Dana, with just simply introducing the questions to the kids at the beginning of on day one.
Mhm.
And by the testing time in March, April, the kids were doing well academically, socially, with behavior, attendance. And when the scorecard, when the test results came back, they outscored the other middle school with academics. And we were winning the attendance awards. We were winning in all of the areas, all because they felt good and they felt safe.
Yeah, you told me about how you went into that school and on the first day um, you showed a hand signal
Yeah.
to get everybody's attention. And then what did you say to those students when you talked to them in an assembly?
Yeah. So I had them all. At first, I asked all the teachers to leave,
Hmm.
and they looked at me and didn't move.
Hmm.
And they thought I was crazy, I think, Dana. I think they, that they, what is this woman doing? And then finally, after a little wait time, somebody got up
Hmm.
and a teacher started to leave, and then the others started to follow. And then someone said, "Are you sure you want to do this? You want to be in here with all these kids?" And I'm like, "Yes, I am sure." Um, and After they left, I raised my hand and I made eye contact with some kids, and they started raising their hands, and everybody got quiet. And when everybody had their hands in the air and they were quiet, I said, "This is how we begin a conversation. I'm
Hmm.
not going to yell. I'm not going to do any of that. This is a signal to you to let you know that I have something I want to talk with you about, not at you, but with you. And I'm going to lower my hand, but that means doesn't mean that that I want you to start talking. I want you to keep listening to me." And I said, "I want you to know that I trust you. And I know that you don't know me. We just met, but I'm hoping that you're going to trust me as well. Because the whole point of what I'm about to tell you is that everyone here is going to work hard to be a trusted adult for you,
Hmm.
so that you know that you can come to one of us when you have a problem, and we're going to help you with finding a solution." And that's how I started with them. And when I told them next was that I only had two rules, I got the same look from the kids that I
Yeah.
got from the teachers. But then, I started with telling them, that everybody was going to feel good and everybody's going to feel safe. And I
Hmm.
explained, how we were going to work on that. And um, it worked because every single day they heard those same words. I made sure that they were hearing them. They were getting experience with being asked those questions, um, and that we were all on board within the leadership of being able to do that consistently. And then the teachers started joining in with us. I didn't ask them to. I didn't go in and say, "This is what you're going to do. This is how we do things around here." I just was talking to them about how I believed, and this is what I was going to do, and they saw what was happening, and they started joining in.
Hmm.
And I had a leadership team for the building, and then I had team leaders with each of the grade levels,
Hmm.
and we just started working from there, and we started building a family, and we were able to make sure that we knew every child, and we knew what their needs were.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and that's really how you made that a community and turned a lot of that experience into a book. Talk to me a little bit about the SEL component. You worked in a lot of different states as a consultant as well. And from my experience, I see also that SEL falls by the wayside in secondary school. Some secondary schools do PBIS. Um,
Mhm.
they do like SEL lessons and an advisory, but it's not consistent. Um, so in your opinion, you said it's checking boxes. So what
Yeah.
is something that we really need to work on more at the secondary level?
Yeah, it is, Dana. It's about checking a box because, you're mandated to do so many things. And one of those is to make sure that you're covering your social emotional learning. And what are you doing in your curriculum to make sure you're covering that? And I don't oppose that. I think that that's an important aspect of a child's growth. What I do oppose is that we aren't taking it seriously
Mhm.
into the point where we're getting the changes that I feel like that we absolutely need to see.
Mhm.
Because I believe society is a reflection of what we've allowed to have happen. And if social emotional learning has been taught in education for all these years, we wouldn't be seeing the lack of self-regulation that we're seeing in the adults that we're experiencing right now. And there's a lot of not not seeing a lot of self-regulation, and there's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of things going on. Um, I'm going to go back to the two rules is very simplistic. in its approach to what it does, but it also is so deep into what it teaches as well. And I think that the depth of what it does is natural.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that some of the canned programs that we have
Mm-hmm.
are don't allow that depth to go
Mm-hmm.
into the thought process of kids. So
Yeah.
the PBIS, they're getting rewards for being good at things that they should just automatically be good at, I
Yeah.
think, as a human. And um, I think that there's a lot of things that people are going to be shoving at lots of people about here's the new shiny thing to do, and um, I've been caught on that too, as well as an educator. I've had to do a lot of lots of things in curriculum. The touch map. I had to do that when I was back in Title One, Chapter One, back in the day. That was horrible for math for kids because then they started counting on fingers instead of memorizing what they needed to know with their facts. Um, Whole language. We didn't teach phonics, and we didn't do. I can go through a whole depth of things with curriculum,
Yeah.
but you're talking about social emotional learning, and we still have the bullying issue, and it is greater today than it ever has been, and it's disheartening for me because the suicide rate for young children is so high. We're seeing kids at the age of 10 years old committing suicide. And that is just, it's heart-wrenching to me. It breaks my heart. And we can blame the social media. Absolutely. We can say that's all to blame, but it goes back to that's not it's a tool, it's a resource that they have, and that's not going to go away. That resource of technology, it's here to stay. We can't go back now and say, okay, kids, you can't be on there. We've got it in their curriculum and education. It's a tool that teachers are using. Technology is part of what they are doing. They have to know and learn how to utilize the technology because it's advancing so fast. What they have to learn how to do is to be able to communicate and be able to have conversations with people, because like you and I are having this conversation and listeners are listening, kids don't know how to interact with people.
Yeah.
And that's what we've got to learn to do in addition to the teaching that we're doing. And that's what the two rules does, is that we bring it in and we say, okay, so here's your problem that you had. So you did this, but how did that work out for you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You've got another problem. So we talk to them about, what was the real issue,
Mm-hmm.
and we have them go back and talk over about, and I have that in the book. We have diagrams and stuff that the kids used. You have different ways that the kids go about finding the solution to the issues that they had. um, and I'm going to be honest, Dana, there was a couple of times I couldn't find the solution for the kids. When you're
Mm-hmm.
dealing with gangs, um, that's hard.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing. So we would come up with the best solution that we could,
Mm-hmm.
um, but it wasn't the best solution. We needed more resources to help us with combating that. But when it was in the home, that was the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give an example. I had a young boy who was in eighth grade. He had failed the eighth grade 2 times, and he was on his way to fail it the third time.
Wow.
And I called him in and I said, what's going on? You're smart. I know that you're smart. What's going on that you are failing eighth grade again? What's going on? Just wait, let's have this conversation. Mrs. Yoho, I'm afraid to go to the high school.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. We've identified the problem. Why are you afraid to go to the high school? Well, because I was born into the gang.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, you're going to have to explain that to me. Well, because I was born into the gang, when you get to the high school, you have to do something more.
Yeah.
There's more things you have to do. I said, okay, all right. Well, I can't solve that for you because I can't tell you to leave your home.
Mhm.
Um, Here's what I can tell you to do. I can tell you, and that's why I go back to know your resources, know your community.
Yeah.
University of Illinois is not that far away from here. I happen to have known one of the professors there, who's a longtime friend of mine. She found a young man in her doctoral program
Mhm.
who was a former gang member.
Wow.
Brought him over, brought him over, and we talked about how he could get through high school, get his education, and then when he became an adult, he could go on and do something different. That he
Mhm.
would just have to get by. And it wasn't the best solution, but it was the solution I could come up with. And that was a tough one, Dana. That was a tough one.
Yeah, but I mean, you dug into your resources and realized that, there was somebody that you knew that could, have somebody come in and make that difference. So, I think, like you said, it's catering. I think the whole thing about this SEL is really looking at your population and also
Mm-hmm.
are there programs that have failed? Are there ways of, navigating while we're working alongside tech, but also, making sure that we're taking care of students who are bullied or, having expectations to, treat each other with kindness, just like your two roles are. I
Yeah.
did want to talk to you about some follow-up workshops you do with staff. Sometimes you say you do a how do we see workshop with color-coded tags.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's important for us to know how we see others. So it's
Mhm.
important for kids to see how they see others. It's important for adults to see how we see others. And this can go with education, it can go with the workforce, it can go in
Yeah.
any climate that you decide. So basically how it goes is that in any work environment, you have your little cliques, you have friends, your coworkers who become your little cliques, your friends. So when people come in, we give them a colored um, paper and they go to a different table so that the friends are not sitting together. And so then we ask them to use the materials that are already at the table for them. And now, if for a school, I have to speak on school because that's my background, for them to create a student that they serve.
Mhm.
So they're building the student. What does the student look like? The characteristics, give them a name, give them everything about the student that you can create, and then hang the student up when you're finished and we'll display them. And so when you're able to do that, and then people can see how they see without you telling them, magical things happen. And that's what I did at the middle school that I served. Both of them actually, I did that same thing in different ways, though. My I had an intern that was working with me, and she create helped me create this how we see, and um, people started hanging up their students,
Mhm.
and so then we began by asking, so what do we see? And then before we could complete the sentence, really, one of our staff members yelled out, "Oh my gosh, guys, look, it's
Mhm.
all negative. Look how we see these kids. Look at it." And then our conversations were able to begin with how that they see the students. And then we started talking about, how do you think the kids feel?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're seeing them that way, how are you talking to them? How are you teaching them? How are you? We started asking the different questions. And so we could be able to have the dialogue. And, then we had the dialogue about, well, then what do you do when you talk to the parents? How are you talking to the parents? Are you communicating with the parents? And those kinds of things. Going back to the homeschool and community, working together. And so Dana, I'm going to go back to the before about your resources. When I realized that we had issues at our building, I invited community organizations to come into our school. I made space for drug and alcohol counselor to come into the school. I invited and made space for a mental health facility counselor to come in to our building, because our kids couldn't get to those resources and our families couldn't do that either. So I brought them into the school, and I made a space for them. And it's hard to find a space,
Mm-hmm.
but I made a space. And so they were able to come on alternating days, so that they could share the same space. And the kids knew that that was the room that they could go to. And we were able to meet the social emotional needs that way too. So I went backwards on you, but we did that. And when the staff were able to go through that workshop and see how they saw the kids,
Mm-hmm.
we started seeing some things differently with how the staff were approaching what they were doing within the classroom and within the teams.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Talk to me a little bit about resiliency and how you worked with staff and sometimes in workshops now about how they can identify 12 steps that are important to build in their school.
Yeah. So resiliency is so important for kids, and it's also important for staff. And so when I talk about with the kids, I want to talk about, I have in my book, there's a chart
Mm-hmm.
that I have people look at. And the 12 things are, I had people to look up to. So you want to look at your students and think about, do they have people that they look up to? How many kids have people in their families that they can look up to? What about the community? Can we bring people in that we can have them to come in and speak? And so they know people in the community they can look up to. How about our staff? Are we people that they can look up to? And then getting an education was important to me. So is education important to them? How important? The third thing, my parents, caregivers, knew a lot about me.
Mm-hmm.
um, that's going back to those communications relationships that we're building with those families and getting to know them, and how much do they know about their child. um, you don't know how disappointing it is when the parents don't even know that who's the principal of the school.
Yeah.
Who's your child's teacher? I don't know. We've got to do better. We've got to get, and parents have got to, families have got to do better. um, I try to finish activities that I started. That's another resiliency. Um, and, that's one of the things that I've learned about kids that are coming from a low economic situation and poverty, and there's lots of trials and tribulations, is that trust issue is huge for them.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's so much trust has been broken, because kids who want to do the extracurricular activities, they can't do it because they don't have transportation to get there, or they have other responsibilities at home, taking care of a sibling. So those are some things that we have to work around. So what can we do to help them? And going back to that partnership with your homeschool and community, how can we solve that issue? What's the solution to that problem for kids? I knew where to go in the community to get help. That's going back to the resources. Help our kids and families know where to go in the community to get resources. I felt I belonged in my school. That goes back to my two rules: feeling good and feeling safe, knowing that you belong, that you're part of something, that when you're not here, we miss you. And I had a rule that most of our kids came to school on a bus. I only allowed 3 buses to dismiss at a time, and there had to be an adult from the school present for the kids to be able to get off the bus. And that's because I wanted them greeted. I wanted them to be greeted by name,
Mhm.
and I wanted to just check on them to see how they were. And if there was something off about them, then we all had radios. We could radio the next person that was the next in triage. Hey, Johnny's not doing really well today. I think something happened. So let's get him turned around before he starts classes today. That's how we worked with our teams so that we could start our kids off the right way every day.
Mhm.
Um, my family would stand by me during difficult times. That's important for the kids to have that support. But what if they don't have that support? What can we do to make sure that we're helping with that? How can we help the family to be support? You know, what in the community, what community resources do we have? My friends would stand by me during difficult times. That's about building that relationship, those communities within your school, helping friends and friendships be built. That was the other thing that we worked on too. I was treated fairly in my community. I had opportunities to develop skills to help me succeed in life. And I enjoyed my community's cultures and traditions.
Mhm.
And so those are the 12. And I think that they are so important. And if you can focus on those 12 and as a school kind of see what you're doing right now to help build in those areas or
Mhm.
and what you could do to improve, what's
Mhm.
something you can do to improve. So if you're writing those improvement plans,
Yeah.
what can you do to improve in one of those 12 areas on your resiliency? Because that helps with social emotional too. So if you're not doing anything with culture and traditions, let's do something.
Yeah.
Let's do something.
Yeah, no, I think that's so important to think about those questions for those people who are really looking to, bring in that community and family aspect to the school, right? And tighten up those ties and, turnaround cultures sometimes that have been lacking in school. So thanks for sharing those. We've had a great conversation today about your trench story, your journey in education from AP to principal and director and now consultant. Out of everything we've talked about, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
I really would like the listeners to remember the 2 rules: spread it, share it, do it, implement it in your home, in your community, workplace, everywhere you go. And if you want a copy for your library or somewhere, just reach out to me and I'll send one to you. I want that message out there because the world would be so much better if we could self regulate and we could understand that we can think before we say or before we do, so that we know that it's not just about us, like me, it's about all of us. It's all of
Yeah,
us together.
yeah, it's so important. Where can people connect with you and find you online?
So I'm mostly on LinkedIn. So Brenda Yoho on LinkedIn, and then brendayoho.com is my website. So I publish every Wednesday.
Okay.
I do blogs and I talk about the 2 rules, and there's lots of stuff that I share for free. And I encourage you to look there. I'm on all the other social platforms as well, but I'm not on there as often because I'm a very busy grandmother. I have 3 grandchildren who keep me hopping. I have a granddaughter who is a wrestler.
Oh, okay.
She's the first female wrestler at her school last year, and now she's in year 2, and she keeps me hopping. And then I have 2 grandsons who are in hockey, and they travel around and do all kinds of hockey stuff. And we're in the busy season right now. So,
Mhm. Well, thank you so much for being my guest on the Out of the Trenches podcast today. I'll make sure to share those links and people can reach out to you. You know, they can pick up a book. They can also maybe have you speak at their school at some point as people plan for next school year. So thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day.
You too, Dana. Thank you. I hope they do reach out. Thanks.